Hey, Mike here with Canadian Musician Magazine. Over the last 6 months or so, I would say, if you're keeping up to date on what's happening in the industry, one of the major announcements back in October was the formation of Music Canada Live, a new trade organization for pretty much everybody that has a stake in live music in Canada. And at the same time as that announcement of the formation of this new association was the announcement of its executive director, Erin Benjamin. Erin, thank you very much for taking the time to do this. I know it's a busy day for you.
Oh, I'm just super glad to talk about this. You know, it's been I've been sitting behind a desk for 5 months, ramping up to this conference. So it's great to be here, and I appreciate the interest.
Fantastic. And there's probably not, on a wide scale at least, especially at the artist level, a whole lot of knowledge as yet as far as what Music Canada Live is or what its mandate is or will be. I know it's still in the early phases, and you guys are, like you said, you're going through kind of a strategic planning phase, I think you said it was, as far as discovering yourselves what's needed for you to do on your members' behalf. But generally speaking, what is Music Canada Live? What is its mandate or its purpose? What was the reason it was formated?
Well, our actual mission statement is that we are the voice of Canada's live music sector, advancing and promoting its many economic, social, and cultural benefits. And I guess it was a couple of years ago now, some sort of stakeholders in live, maybe it was the advent, just before, when the Ontario Music Fund conversation was getting ramped up in Ontario, and the ministry was looking for stakeholders to connect with to help determine some guidelines for that program. They were able to reach out really effectively to the trade associations representing, for example, the major labels or the Independent Music Industry Association, etc. So when it came to live, which they knew would have a stream in the program, they weren't exactly sure who to talk to. So they were picking the brains of a couple of really smart people who absolutely informed the process. But during that experience, those folks working in live sort of, really began to realize that they weren't talking to each other. They started to sit down together and I think there was some fear around the competitive nature of live, and maybe they felt they were sort of, that they just weren't able to, they were afraid of giving away trade secrets. They just didn't connect for whatever reason before. They knew who each other was, of course, and they would see each other socially, but just in terms of doing business together, it was just perceived as a little more complicated. So when they sat down to talk about the OMF is just one example, but using that, when they sat down to talk about what this opportunity might mean for all of them, they realized that they actually really did share a bunch of common goals, and they felt this immediately, that giant light bulb went off, and they sort of decided that their interests would be best served through a trade association, a united voice, really articulating the sort of the what live music really needed, instead of letting either a provincial ministry or the federal government having to go from stakeholder to stakeholder. That would be more effective to be able to speak as one. And so they were looking across the industry and realizing that's how it worked. And it's not that they didn't know that before, and I'm not exactly sure why this trade association hasn't been born until now. It's a diverse, complex piece of the music industry. Live looks, really, big companies to small, grassroots, locally based concert promoters, that sort of thing. So the way they work looks very different from one another, but ultimately they're about putting great music on stages for audiences. And when we can, when they collectively sort of agreed that was what they were all trying to achieve, they realized that an association would be a really effective mechanism for which they could speak to stakeholders like government.
Is there internationally in some of the other major music markets, is there a comparable association that can kind of provide a blueprint for you guys, or is this really a one of a kind?
It's a great question, and the answer is no. As far as we've been able to tell, there is the live music office in Australia, and lots of the Aussies are here. I've had a meeting with it's Damien Cunningham, who's the fellow from that shop, but they're a government agency. So we have actually, with live music office in Australia, some really similar sort of plans and designs on building capacity in the live music sector. But as a government agency, we're not for-profit membership-based industry association, so it's not apples to apples. And there's, there are a couple of other organizations that are maybe city-based around the world that sort of support their venues. But as far as I've been able to tell, the answer is no. So that's made a really interesting challenge to try and figure out how to get, the right people around the table and to figure out exactly what it is we want to be doing.
Yesterday I was speaking with Mike Tanner, the new Music Sector Development Officer for the City of Toronto. And he said he was announced in his new position around the same time that Music Canada Live and yourself were announced. And he said in these intervening months, a big part of the initial phase of his job is figuring out what his job is in a way, and going to all the interested parties and saying, what exactly do you need, and how can we work with you in that? And on kind of on the flip side of that, what's working well and doesn't need as much attention? Have you been going through a similar process, and what have you been finding generally?
It's really incredible. It's exactly how we're going to roll this thing out. And coincidentally, Damien in Australia started about the same time as Mike and I. It's really, I really think it says a lot about what's happening with live music globally. So yeah, we've been talking. It's basically one conversation at a time. It's almost like being a band and building an audience base, like one conversation at a time with different, concert promoters, venues, festivals, agents, ticketing companies, to try and say, what can an association do for you? Have you ever thought about it? We've been identifying some priorities that we think would really resonate for potential members of the association, and having that conversation. And through our strategic plan, which is so paramount for an association to really engage with, this, the consultation aspect of any kind of strategic plan is critical to be able to not only to help potential members feel engaged, but for us to really get the pulse of the community, right? Like, we need to know, the similarities and the differences. What's it like to be a music festival in Vancouver? What are the challenges of being something like Halifax Pop Explosion in Halifax? What are some of the municipal issues they face? So a real range of needs, but ultimately we're going to hear those stories one at a time, and we're all about outreach right now and really trying to spark those conversations and get people interested in coming to us with, and tell us what it is they need. And I think we're going to try and be as nimble and flexible as we can be out of the gate. There's no way we're going to we are not out of the box here. Like, we're not a ready-made solution for anything. We have 3 priorities right now that we're talking a lot about. Advocacy, certainly, on behalf of Live, and that takes a lot of different shapes and sizes for sure. Stakeholder business development, so maybe that's professional development or networking for members, and trying to determine, do we need best practice guides around tax legislation, or how do you settle a show? I mean, it's all we're with a range of kind of members that we're interested in connecting with. And then research. So one of the things that hasn't happened in this country comprehensively, although there has been some effort to date in recent months, is to really sort of figure out what we need to be counting. What are the most important things for us to be counting, and how do they effectively help us tell the story of live music in this country to policymakers and politicians and bureaucrats and even public about the value of live music, and how live music is, can be so important to quality of life in our cities across the country, really coast to coast to coast. And I mean Northern Canada, I mean Northern Ontario, I mean rural Ontario. I mean, live music happens everywhere, and we would like to be able to understand what its footprint looks like in terms of demographics, economics, all of those things, and be able to really quantify all of this activity so we can really get a sense of what this industry, looks like.
Will you and the association be involved on a regional level as well as a national level? Because, as obviously you would know, the regulations and policies and that kind of stuff that has an effect on every stakeholder in live music can vary very widely from province to province and city to city. Are you looking mostly at national issues, or are you getting involved in, say, specific city policies?
It's a great question, and it's fundamental that we take a look at what's happening municipally across the land, because there are massive disparities. There are some cities who get it really right. Toronto has an amazing opportunity with Mike Tanner in that shop, right? Like, it's like a really incredible experience for Toronto. Toronto is a completely different music marketplace than any other city in Canada, of course. So I'll go back to my Halifax example. I mean, a totally different context for the folks in Halifax trying to put concerts on than it would be in Calgary or Edmonton or Thunder Bay, for that matter. So we definitely want to. What part of our plan is to build a critical mass of members in different cities and towns in this country, and then be able to work directly with those members on municipal issues. Because and the other thing that I think that will allow us to do is identify, again, some best practices where we can bring one city into another. For example, if something's working really well in Toronto, let's get Toronto and Halifax talking together, the town councils, the mayors, whatever needs to happen, to be able to say, here's some regulatory policy that really works for live, and here are the benefits of these kinds of policies. Here's what you can stand to gain from embracing the kind of administrative bureaucratic, whatever it is, to create the conditions for concerts to thrive in your city. Here is what you stand to gain. What the economic, whether it's music tourism, economic impact, opportunities for local artists, all of these things. Really, I think, because concerts happen at a local level, will be engaged. But certainly provincially, we'd like to be having conversations. Ontario's the grateful beneficiary of this amazing thing called the Ontario Music Fund. I mean, it's truly an incredibly important opportunity. And there is, there's no reason that we can't have a conversation with provincial governments about that, what that kind of investment might look and feel like in other parts of the country. And certainly federally, there are all kinds of everything from tax legislation to immigration to, there are no end of issues that manifest federally that we would definitely want to be involved in.
Interesting. From a bit of an outsider's perspective, it seems like prior to, I would say, I'll say 2 years ago, the argument for the benefits of live music seemed to be a lot from kind of a cultural, altruistic standpoint. It's good for building a sense of community, enthusiasm, and that kind of stuff, but which obviously is true and is important. But it seems in the last couple of years, there's been a real emphasis and awareness towards the economic benefits of a strong live music sector through things like the launching of the Ontario Music Fund, which the provincial government has now committed to permanently. The federal government had its own music industry report and recommendations. Provincial associations across the country are launching these economic impact surveys to create these arguments so that they can go to their municipal and provincial governments and say, not only is just this good from a cultural standpoint, it's good from an economic standpoint. That economic argument to live music, do you think it's a more productive, a more convincing argument to be making when you're dealing with governments?
Yes. Yes, but I think it goes hand in hand with, I always talk about the impact on quality of life too. I don't think we could ever sort of set that aside. It's intrinsic to the economic argument, but governments understand numbers. And this industry, especially live, because it hasn't been as organized and able to tell its own story, quantitatively in the past, I think it's really important that we count ourselves and we figure out exactly what our economic footprint is and potential as well. And governments certainly understand that. And we can talk about job creation. We can suddenly talk about a lot of other things like the cultural and social importance of the work that we do. There's no question that measuring the economics of live music are a major piece of the puzzle when we set out to tell our story. And I think that's smart. I think the music industry is, better late than never, really waking up to the way that other industries, other sectors, automotive, forestry, healthcare, whatever it is, this is how it works in Canada. You're able to demonstrate with, smart methodology and good numbers around, why what you do is important. And we're going to tell our story any way that we can. And gathering those numbers is paramount. Again, it's just really something that politicians understand. I think they also understand how the economics impact quality of life too. So that's why I say they're intrinsic. I want to gather stories from audience about why the last show they saw changed their lives too. Those kinds of things. You can't. We all know how live music moves us, right? It was the premier who said at the announcement of the last round of the OMF granting in May, a couple months ago now, who said something like, this is such a great opportunity because we know how music moves us. And that is something that we all understand in a different way, but we all understand it. And that's a part of the story. Yeah, definitely. So the qualitative, the quantitative, but we need to work with government too. If they say, show me the money, where are the numbers? We need to be able to demonstrate that. And it's good for ourselves too. It's really important, I think, to empower some of our members. It will be important to empower them to be able to tell their own story municipally as well, so that we really elevate the conversation and get us to a place where we can, hopefully go full circle and talk about the vitality, the way that attending a live music event, can really change your life.
Interesting. And lastly here, with your members, the venue owners, promoters, festivals, that kind of stuff, often what's good for them is good for artists as well. But there's also going to be a conflict there in interest between artists and the folks that Music Canada Live is representing or working on behalf of. Is there a facilitation there between the artist level and the business level that you guys will have a role in, or that you think is necessary?
I really believe that the artists and audiences are the ultimate beneficiaries of our work. Yeah. Yes, there's business to be done, and business gets done in a particular way sometimes. Will Music Canada Live be all about, leveraging greater deals for concert promoters? No. I mean, it's about getting, bringing live music to fans who want to see it. And so when there's greater capacity in the live music industry, it's better for artists, it's better for Canadians from coast to coast to coast. There is no better way to say it. This is about artists and it's about audiences.
Well said. Erin, I know you have panels coming up very shortly here. And like I said at the beginning, it's a very, very busy day for you, and a lot of people have questions for you. But I really appreciate you taking this time and kind of bringing some clarification to this new association. I'm really looking forward to seeing what you guys will be doing and will have in the works.
Again, thank you for your interest, for your excellent questions. And I think that music journalism in general is, the glue that brings us all together. One of my favorite things to say is we're all in this together, and we can't do what we do without you doing what you do. So I really appreciate the opportunity to talk today.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. That means a lot. Cheers.